right, so first things first, we'll do some introductions, and then we'll get started with the presentation. So some of you know me, some on Zoom are unknown to me, so I will introduce myself briefly. I am Kristen Seitz. I am the Assistant Director of Learning and Success here at the Mount. What you are attending is part of our weekly series called the Tools for Academic Success. So every Tuesday, 4 o'clock, we have one of these sessions on lots of different academic skills or professional skills, some kind of helpful topic to help everybody be a little more successful. So we do these every semester. This is our last one of this semester because, of course, this is also our last week of classes, believe it or not. So we'll be resuming this again when we start classes back up again for the spring semester. You'll see a schedule of that coming out at some point as we get closer to the start of next semester. Hopefully you can join us for some of next semesters as well. The ones from earlier in this semester have all been recorded, and this one is also being recorded. They all get put onto the Center for Student Engagement and Success website, so that's CSES. You can search that on the Mount website if you want to watch any of our past movies or videos from other weeks. Feel free. Hopefully some of them, if you've missed them, might be helpful coming into the end of this semester or next. For those in the room here, I don't think you got one of these. There's a handout. There is a handout that if I can't file share it, I'll just pull up and show it to you guys later when we get to that part of the presentation. But for the first part of today, we're going to go through a PowerPoint. Today's session is getting ready for finals. Obviously, those are coming in a couple of weeks because I keep hearing folks tell me, oh, we just got to get to November 20th. I'm like, well, not really, because there's finals, right? There's a whole week after Thanksgiving we have to tend to. So we're not quite done, and this is definitely the time to be getting ready for and thinking about what needs to be happening this week and next week during the break in order to have a good finals week. So we're going to talk about that today. Also, little PSA. Today being our last session, we are going to do our last round of raffles because we do raffles for attendance at these sessions. So every time you come to a TAS session, you get entered into a monthly drawing. We do them every month. We did one in September, one in October. We're doing the November one today. We have two prizes. We have a nice little sweatshirt and a nice rain jacket we're raffling for this month's raffle prizes. And then we do a grand prize drawing. So everybody who's come to any of the sessions the whole semester, you earned an entry every time you came into the grand prize drawing, which is for this lovely little Bluetooth speaker. So I will be giving those off at the end of the session. So hopefully you can stay on to hear who wins. We'll do a random number generator and pull some winners at the end. So that's the business stuff. I'm going to go ahead and get the PowerPoint up here, and we can actually need to share it. We can get started with that. So there we go. So here's this little PowerPoint we're going to go through today to talk about what you should be thinking about getting ready for final exams. So I'll wait till that loads up for the Zoom folks. There we go. Okay, so great. So it's a preparation guide for finals. There's my name and information, obviously. So we're going to go through different kinds of finals. You know, there's lots of different kinds of things you might be working on. First thing we're going to talk about are timed finals, right? So the things where you have to go in at a particular time and take some kind of an exam, right? In preparing for timed finals, you should be sure to know dates, times, and locations. Obviously, this year final exams are fully remote, right? So they won't be in a room, a physical room, but they may be in some other kind of virtual room, and you need to know what that might be. So you should know if you're taking your exam in Canvas, you should know if it's in Zoom, you should know if it's in a lockdown browser, or a new thing we've got this semester called ProctorU. If you are not sure, you need to ask your teachers. You should definitely ask by this week, if you haven't already, where you're going to take your finals, you know, which of these formats, because some of the things like Lockdown Browser and ProctorU require certain technologies. ProctorU requires you to actually run a whole test of their software on your system before you get started. You certainly don't want to be doing all of that as you're supposed to be starting the exam, right? You don't want to be losing exam time because typically the counter for the exam is still starting, even if you're not ready with the tech stuff. So you want to find out now so that you are completely ready. You're not going to have any tech issues, any compatibility problems. Come time for your exam, you need to know what you're going to have to do. And as far as the time frame, if you're not familiar, our registrar's website, if you go under undergraduate student schedules for fall, it will say the fall final exam schedule. If you're on campus, we've also posted it in a couple places. It's in the CSES area of the library where I work. We've got it posted in there. We also are going to be posting it over in Patriot in the next day or so on one of the walls as you come in to the left. So it's going to be posted, but it's also been on the registrar's website since like last May. So it's there. Take a look. The days and times are not usually the same as your class time. So you really got to watch that. If you don't know which day or time it is, make sure you find that out. Make a schedule for next week or for the week of exams. I suggest asking your professor if there will be any kind of extra time available, you know, if they're going to give a built-in extra 10 or 15 minutes for those who need it. It's a good idea just to know if you might have that option. You know, especially if you're somebody who tends to run towards the end of your time frame, but even if you're not, you never know. It's probably good just to be aware of what your options are. Or maybe if you're allowed to start early, you know, sometimes they'll let people come in early. And if you do, maybe you get a little extra 5 or 10 minutes. So just kind of check. Also, you need to know the format and length of the exam. So right now, if you don't already know, you should be checking the syllabus, you should be checking Canvas, and or asking your professor in your classes this week or in office hours, by email, whatever. You need to find out what it is and how long it is, right? So is it multiple choice? Is it some kind of objective thing, matching true, false, something like that? Or is it short answers, essay questions? Is it both? How much, right? So trying to figure that out. You know, I will say a lot of people say things to me like, oh, well, every other test in this class has been X. And so they assume the final is going to be that same way. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So it's not safe to make that assumption, and I strongly encourage you to double check that at this point because, and we'll get to this, the format of the exam really should affect the way you study and prepare for it. Okay, and then of course you should know what content as well. So you should know if the exam is cumulative, meaning it covers everything from the beginning of the semester, or sometimes they call it semi-cumulative, where it's like from the second half of the semester on, you know, like maybe from midterms to the end. Or if it's just recent material, maybe it's more like a last test than a final, right? You should know that, so you know how much to prepare. I typically tell people if it is a cumulative exam, like a true cumulative exam where you're covering content from August to now, then you should really be starting, you should have already probably started. Studying for a big cumulative exam like that tends to take about 2 to 3 good weeks, not, you know, hours every day, but you need to space that time. Everybody who came to my memorization skills workshop early in the semester will remember why, right? You need to definitely space that practice. The more material, the more distribution you need. So if it's a big cumulative exam, you got to start right away. If it's more of a last test, 1 to 2 weeks, right? So at least early next week, if not before, you want to start. I also recommend making an exam prep folder, like an actual folder if you have paper things, or an electronic folder to collect all of your stuff for each class, right? So have a place where you are keeping all of your stuff for each class where you're having some kind of an exam. So maybe that's your past quizzes, tests, handouts, notes, whatever, right? Whatever the stuff is that you've been given, you should have a place where you're collecting all of that, either paper or electronic or both. And that helps you, so that as you're studying, you're already organized, you're not digging around, where's that one handout, where's that thing? You know, something's on the study guide and you don't know where the thing that goes with it is. Get it organized now. And that'll make sure too, before you move out, if you're moving out this week, that you have your stuff, that you don't accidentally leave something crucial in your room here on campus. Okay, let's talk about starting the study blocks early. The really big thing about that too is routine. So as much as possible, I really encourage you to make it rhythmic, right? Set times that you can kind of stick to the rest of this week. Next week, I know there's a holiday next week, but outside of the actual holiday, trying to get some blocks of time, a rhythm of scheduling each class, right? Make sure you're dedicating time to each class over the course of the next couple of weeks. One of the problems I've seen with this, like scheduling times, people will do this thing where they'll say, oh, okay, well, my first exam is Spanish. My second exam is math. So I'm just gonna study all for Spanish first. And then I'll start math once I take Spanish. There's a big problem with that, which is that theoretically, your tests are all a few days apart, right? Maybe a day apart. So if you don't start studying for one until you've mostly finished studying for the other, you're shortchanging all of the later exams. That will really hurt you. Plus, it's bad for your brain. It's much better for your brain to learn different things, to not spend all of your time on one thing for several days. So it's ideal to make chunks where you're, each day, maybe you study an hour or two for one thing, and then you study an hour or two for something else. And you do that split up, so you're kind of taking breaks from one subject with another, right? And keeping that difference, that variation for your brain is helpful. So as you're setting that study schedule, try to keep that in mind. Okay. Okay, so now some specific suggestions for how to study. All right, so you might want to consider, if you have not seen something in over 3 weeks, actually rereading that content. So going through the whole PowerPoint or all of your notes, chapters in textbooks, actually rereading something if it's been more than 3 weeks or so since you've actually looked at it. Our brain, our long-term retention of things like that are not usually good. If we're not actively looking at it, the details, they're going to disappear after a few weeks. So it's a good idea to go back and reread, at least skim, things that you haven't seen in a few weeks. Now, more recent readings, you might just need to review, make sure you have grasp of those things. I do recommend reviewing all of your notes, both yours and any your professor posts. And at this point, definitely a good time to be asking questions if you need any kind of clarification. So this is really a good week for the reviewing, the rereading, the skimming, because now, while you still have access to your teachers, you can ask questions that might be helpful to you as you're getting closer to the exam. So looking now for any of those clarifications, knowledge gaps that may have developed in the last several weeks or months, this is the time to be looking into that and figuring out where those issues might be, getting the help you need now. Okay. I do recommend that you have summaries that are either written or verbal of the key concepts, right? So doing some kind of summary, being able to put things in your own words absolutely helps with your content retention and understanding. If you can explain something in your own terms, that helps you much more. I mean, in some cases, some classes require you to memorize exact definitions. So of course, if you have to, you should memorize those definitions, but you should still know what they mean in your own terms. Because if you don't, you're going to find that the application piece might be missing. You won't really understand them. So, and usually you have to do both. Even if you have to memorize the definition, you still have to know how to use it. Now, study guides. Obviously, it's nice if your teachers give them to you. Of course, you should use them. If they don't, you should make your own. There is nothing wrong with doing that. And it's actually not terribly hard. It's a good study exercise too. If you know these chapters are on the exam, go through everything. Go through the readings, go through the notes, the lectures, and make your own study guide. what are the main points as you see it going through that content? Potentially making some kind of little tools to help you study along the way as you do that. So making your flashcards along the way, Quizlets maybe, or some kind of practice test. You absolutely should do some kind of practice, some kind of rehearsal, practice test sort of a thing, whatever that looks like. Some people do it through something like Quizlet or the different websites and tools that are out there electronically. Some people actually write out practice questions for themselves. Sometimes they have a partner. So this is a good idea. Maybe you find somebody else to help with this, but you should in fact have some kind of practice. If you don't practice, you're missing a key part of your memory. That self-testing is crucial to getting stuff into your brain. So this is why I earlier on said about the format. The practice you do should match the format. So if you are doing an exam that's more multiple choice or objective in nature, then your practice test should be that way. They should be multiple choice practice questions, things like flashcards. There should be something to match. If you're doing fill in the blank, one of the ones I suggest is you like take your notes and or your study guide or whatever, and you make a copy of it with all the keywords taken out, and you have to practice filling them in, right? Stuff like that. So the practice test should mimic the content, like the format of the exam. If it's something more subjective, you still should have practice tests. They're just going to look different. So let's say your whole test is short answers and essays. You should still practice that. You would come up with potential questions based on the content that you think your teacher might ask, especially based on previous tests or quizzes, right? You're not going to get them right exactly, but you're probably going to get decently close, at least on the content. And so what then you would do is you would practice trying to come up with what you would say. If they're short answers, maybe you actually write some practice short answers to the questions you write. Or if they're essays, maybe you at least write in an outline. But the point is, you should be able to answer your own practice short answer or essay questions without having to look at all the material. You should be able to come up with this stuff without looking, because then that means that the material is in your brain enough that you can do it. So I strongly encourage people to do some sort of practice test that matches as much as possible to the format of the test. Okay, so I have on here 3 times a day. There is some studying research that has proven that it's helpful to look at the same stuff, not just once a day, but actually 3 times in the same day for shorter bursts. So in other words, some of the studies I've seen say that instead of saying, okay, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 straight hours studying for this one class, if you split that up, and maybe in the morning you do a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then in the afternoon you do another half hour, 45 minutes, and then you do it again in the evening, that 3 times a day thing is actually going to help more with your long-term memory, your retention of that material, than if you just did that one long burst, one time during the day. This is particularly effective as you get closer to your actual test. So as you near the exam in that last couple of days, this is a particularly good strategy. So I would encourage people to think about trying that as they're building their schedules. I also mentioned group studying is very helpful. I've got a slide on this here shortly. It can be anyway. Comparing.
No, that does not mean cheating.
No, it does not mean cheating. Quite right. See, it says group studying is meant to supplement, not replace your own personal studying. Thank you, Pablo. So basically, a good study group says, okay, so let's meet together, let's quiz each other, let's make sure we each understand and explain things back and forth that we don't understand, go through the material together. A bad study group is where somebody says, okay, so you read this chapter and I'll read this chapter and then we'll explain it to each other. Bad plan. You should still study and learn the material on your own. And then the group studying is just a way to help solidify that content or further understand it. So Yes, not an excuse for cheating, although it's correct. Okay. Right before the exam, okay. Right, so now let's hope you've studied, right? You've done what you're supposed to do. You get to the day of the exam, right before. This is where people tend to get a little nervous and get a little fidgety and worried. If you do tend to get anxious, I strongly discourage people from looking at the material right before they walk into the test. This frantic flipping that tends to happen, where you've got your notes and stuff and you're like, just gonna look at all this stuff one more time, and they're like flying through all the pages in 10 or 15 minutes before the exam. What that tends to do raises your anxiety, your blood pressure. It also raises the possibility you see that one thing that you do not immediately recall, and then it undermines your whole confidence going into the test. It's very dangerous. So I strongly discourage this. Do all your studying, get up, get ready, eat something, and then go take the test. Don't do the flipping through. If you're gonna need to do some basic review, do it earlier in the day, right? Get up early enough, or come get yourself home and ready early enough that you can do that review and then still have time, like a good hour or so, where you can stop. You can not be studying, you can just be getting yourself in a good place. Go listen to some good music, go for a walk, something to get yourself in a better place than sitting there frantically studying, making sure you're shoving everything into your brain. Because truly, if you know anything about how the brain and memory works, you will not learn anything new at that point. There's no new learning happening at that stage. And so really it doesn't do you much good. It really just makes people much more nervous. Now, eating, right? So always eat. This whole, oh, I didn't have time to eat. You're killing yourself. Your body requires basic stuff in order to properly function, especially your brain. You can't expect your brain to have higher level thinking if you have not properly fed it or rested it. So those next two kind of go in the same, right? Same category. You have to take care of yourself enough that your brain is in good shape to take this test, right? So eat foods high in protein. That's a good fact, because proteins, they make your brain actually, the neurons fire faster. If you have
no calories.
What's that?
No calories.
No calories?
Or anything that has fat.
What's that?
Anything that has fat.
Yeah, well, I mean, calories are fine by themselves. It's just the kind of calories. So protein, there's good proteins and bad proteins, right? There's your really heavy fat meats and things like that maybe aren't a great idea, but some kind of protein is good. So, especially if the exam's early in the day, make sure you have breakfast with some kind of protein, maybe dairy or nuts, peanut butter, things like that, eggs, something with protein so that your brain works better. But definitely eat something. So you're not going to go in there with an empty stomach, your brain's not properly, because all that's going to happen is the whole time your brain's distracted by the fact that it's hungry, and you're going to have trouble staying focused and making things process. Okay, and similarly, getting a good night's sleep, right? I think Gerald Ruth was here a few weeks ago, and he said that college students in particular are terrible at sleeping, which is true. I think most people are not as good at sleeping as they should be, but particularly in the college years, people seem to just abandon all regular practice of sleeping. This is bad, but it's especially bad at exam time. And it's also the time when people are especially tempted not to sleep. It's really, really bad, because if you do not sleep, and not just the night before, but for at least a few nights before your exam, your sleep cycle is disrupted enough that it is going to create problems for your brain in the processing, the retention, the recall of information. You're going to have trouble with that. So it is a very good idea, at least a few days before you start taking exams, to start getting a good, regular 7, 8 hours of sleep, right? Definitely nothing less than 6. You're gonna have trouble trying to focus if you're getting less than that. Okay, and this is an interesting one. Quite a lot of research about mind, body, space connections, right? Environmental effects on the mind. There is a lot of evidence that studying in a similar space to the place where you will have to recall, like where you will be when you have to recall that information, that is very helpful for your recall. So if you're going to be taking your exam in a particular space in your home or somewhere, you should try to do some of your studying in that same space, because that would make some benefit, it seems. And then, that also relates to other things like smells, tastes. So if you are going to potentially be eating a particular thing on the day of your exam, you might want to think about eating that same thing when you're studying. There's definitely some connections there that might make your recall of the content better. It sounds a little weird, but it does seem to work. Also, getting set up for the exam early, but not too early, right? So you don't want to be sitting there for 30 plus minutes at the same space where you're going to take that test, not taking the test, right? Because all that does, again, is give you time to have your anxiety levels get raised, make things a little bit more mentally taxing than they need to be. And so I encourage you, I see some chats, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention. Oh, I see. Oh, thanks, okay. So, what I would recommend is that you get yourself where you need to be, have what you need to have, you get your computer ready, everything's logged in and ready to go, right? But not for an hour ahead, right? 10, 15 minutes maybe, that's fine. But not too much longer than that, or you'll give yourself more time to worry and fuss. You want to be comfortable, bring what you need. You really don't want to be fumbling around during the test, trying to find your calculator if you need it, trying to find the thing that you need in order to take the test. And try to be comfortable. And the other thing is making sure your testing environment is as free as possible from distractions or anxiety triggers, whatever those may be for you. Now, I realize that some of our homes might be more conducive to taking tests than others. I know some of you might have younger siblings or family members or pets. I've talked to a lot of students who seem to have very distracting pets. So you might want to think about trying to find a way to reduce those distractions as much as possible for the time you're going to be taking the exam, right? Talk to the other members of your household to see if they can help with this. If anybody watches from earlier this semester, Jack Dudley did a presentation on remote learning and how to do it well. He talked about having a thing he called a cat barrier, because he apparently has 12 cats in his house. And so he builds up this barrier on the door to make sure they can't get in when he's teaching. So something like that, right? You want to think about some kind of arrangement, whatever precautions you can take to try to make sure your testing environment is as free as possible from distractions and anxiety triggers as well. Anything that might make you nervous. Some people don't like being near a clock. Some people don't like being near a window, right? Whatever it is, that might be a particular problem for you. You should think about that and then try to make sure that the place you're taking your test is as free as possible from that problem. Okay, so then, come on. There it goes. During the exam, I recommend that you look over the entire test before you begin, if possible, and that you plan your attack. So I know some of the tests are such that you can't actually see all the questions, and that's fine. But if you can, look at them and at least see how much there is so that you can kind of mentally plan your attack. If you can go out of sequence, are you going to tackle certain sections before others? What's the best way for you to get at this? Read every direction carefully. So be very cautious that you're not doing something like, for example, on certain tests, like language tests I've seen, they'll say, fill in the word, but not the article, or vice versa, right? So being careful to follow the directions and you don't find yourself putting in information that is not needed, that you lose points for having, or missing information that's necessary for full credit. So read the directions very carefully. Be aware that answers to some questions are embedded in other questions. So it's entirely possible that as you are reading, you might get stuck, you might not know a question, and the immediate urgency is to like try to answer it, right? And or to freak out, one or the other. Neither are really that great. If you can leave it blank and come back to it later, because the possibility is pretty high that another question might give you clues or information to help you go back and answer that question. So if that's happening, mark down which question that was, and if you're able to leave it blank, keep moving and come back to it later. If not, do your best guess with it, and then perhaps you can change the question answer later on if you need to. Speaking of that, changing your answers. If you have the option to do that, I realize it depends how the teacher set up the test, but if you have the ability to change your answers, some people, does anybody have a problem where they change the answers and they change them to the wrong answers? Yes, this happens often. This is because often you're psyching yourself out and you're tricking yourself into thinking that there was something wrong with your first answer when there wasn't. So there's a little mental game that I tell people to play with themselves. If you have the urge to change an answer that you have already put down, I want you to ask yourself why you would be making that change. So if you could explain it to somebody else, pretend that I was there and I said, hey, wait, Julie, before you change that answer, what are you going to change it for? Like, why? Why is this happening? If you could tell me, then you can change it. But if you couldn't, then you leave it alone. Because this is how we differentiate between the rational part of our brain and the irrational part of our brain. If there's actually a rational good reason for changing that answer, you would be able to explain it. If you can't, then you should leave it alone. Taking a quick break, if you can. I realize that some tests make you stay in the same place. And if they've got the lockdown browser and they're watching you, you can't get up and move around. If you're able to get up and move around, feel free to do that. If you're getting distracted or anxious, you're starting to fall asleep, feel free to do that. If you can't move, even feel free to do that in your seat. If you need to just stop for a second, like put your hands down, do a little grounding exercise, right? In your seat, do it. Because you should take a minute, if you need one, to get yourself refocused and back on track. People do tend to get frustrated. They'll say things like, oh, well, I don't want to, I always run out of time. I don't want to take a minute because then I won't have time to finish. And I'll say, all right, if you're feeling like you're falling asleep, you're getting distracted, you're getting nervous, any of those things, you're going to lose time on this test. So it is better to take a minute, get yourself together, collect yourself, so you can make the most out of the rest of the time, rather than continuing to fuss or fall asleep and then losing the rest of the time anyway. So you should take that minute if you need it. Make note of any key words that might change your answer. So things like negatives or absolutes. Absolutes are the ones where it's like always, never, every. The things that are just very absolute, instead of things like frequently, typically, often, sometimes, usually. Those are good words. Absolutes are usually something to be careful about in tests because few things are very absolute. Few things are every, always. Things are usually, right? So be aware of those words when you see them. Sometimes if it's like a multiple choice or true false, that might make you question the answer. And then watch for your vocab. Make sure you're catching when you see that important stuff in the test questions. A good thing, of course, is eliminating your incorrect multiple choice answers. Oh, and people do this, they look for patterns. They're like, oh, I've already said B 4 times, it can't be B again, right? your teachers aren't counting, right? Most of the time, they are not fussing about how many A, B's, C's, and D's they have, right? So don't worry about patterns. They are almost never there. And so, you know, just worry about what seems to be the best answer rather than wasting time doing pattern counting. Okay, for essay questions, I do encourage people to, if they can, make some kind of outline. This just keeps you focused because otherwise it's really easy when you're writing an essay during a test to kind of veer off course and ramble. And then sometimes you leave out something crucial that you needed to say and you lose points. So a little quick outline at the beginning to say, okay, I need to say A, B, C, and D, keeps you focused, make sure you get all the important stuff down. And it usually makes you more efficient too when you're writing the answer. And I do recommend, if you can and you're able to review your answers, leaving 5 to 10 minutes at the end to do that. Again, with the information about changing answers, but it's just a good idea because, you know, without the changing to incorrect answers irrationally, reviewing is good because people will otherwise do things like leave whole sections blank sometimes, totally by accident, or entirely misreading something. So that quick review, just to make sure at least that you answered everything and that you put what you meant to put. That's crucial. You really don't want to lose points for silly things like that. Okay. Now, many of you will probably have final papers, final projects. I promised to talk a little bit about that. So, regarding final papers, if you don't already know when your deadlines are, you need to know now. Find out, figure it out now, and watch for the deadlines that are the same days or very close together. You want to know that so you can plan ahead, you can budget your time. So again, similar with tests, you probably don't want to be like, I'm just going to write this paper until it's done, and then I'm going to write this paper until it's done. It's usually smarter to take a good look at both papers and figure out what steps are needed for each and budget your time and do part of this and then part of that and kind of go back and forth a bit. It's usually better for your writing and for your brain. I just said this to a kid a half an hour ago before the session started that, you know, it was like, oh, well, there's 2 things due Friday, so I'm going to do this one first, and then when that's done, I'll look at the second one. Hadn't even looked at the assignments, right? And that's dangerous because if you don't even look at the second one until you're done with the first one, you might find yourself running out of time, not being able to finish that second one. So it's better to look at them now, all of them, figure it out, make your plans. And then you have control of the papers. They don't have control of you. Okay, carefully read the assignments as soon as you have them. Now, if you haven't already. That way you're aware of the requirements, what's going to take more time. Is there a lot of reading or outside research that you have to do? So you make sure you have time to do that. Break the paper into parts and steps. So I really encourage people to do this, give themselves mini deadlines basically. So for each part, they say, okay, well, first I need to pick a topic. I want to do that by Wednesday. And then I need to read these articles, or I need to find articles or whatever. And I'm going to do that by Thursday, right? And they give themselves mini deadlines, write them down in a calendar or something, hold yourself to those so you can keep on track. It's a very good idea to be clear on your thesis or your main idea, your topic, early on, and then double check, go back and reread that assignment once you come up with your idea. Make sure it fits. Unfortunately, this happens. I've been having this conversation with some first-year students a lot recently with our symposium paper, and they come up with this idea, and then I'm like, actually, for the assignment, it needs to be more like this, right? And so they're going off on one way, and I have to kind of pull them back in. So double check that when you come up with your thesis or your topic, reread that assignment, make sure it actually works, and make sure you can find enough sources or evidence to support it. Because if you pick a topic and you think, oh, this is great, and then you wait till the day before and you start trying to find your sources and you can't find any, now you're in trouble. You might have to start all over. So that's tough. Try to plan for that early. Okay, I recommend trying to get at least a draft of that paper done a day or two ahead. Ideally, this week before the end of classes. I don't know if any of you saw this, but the Writing Center, it's closed after this week. So if anybody was planning on using the Writing Center to go through a paper, you have to, for the asynchronous part, you have to submit it no later than tomorrow, I think, because it's a 48-hour turnaround. And if you do a live Zoom conference with one of the tutors, the last day to schedule to have one of those is Friday. So it'd be a good idea if you're going to use them to get a draft done this week. Or if you can use the professor or somebody else to help you, try to get it done at least a day or two before the due date so that you can have time to get that feedback and make the corrections. Okay? Oh, and the peer tutor thing, a lot of people on this call are tutors. You know, some tutors tutor during exam week, some don't. So make sure you know if your tutor is planning to tutor that week, if you want to use them. And if not, make arrangements to meet with them beforehand. Okay. All right, a little bit on this. I will not belabor this. However, on the whole topic of what you eat and drink mattering, what you eat and drink matters, and as does alcohol. It's not a great idea when you're trying to learn new things or recall new things. So just be aware, you know, it can have impacts for up to a couple of days after. So it's a really good idea to kind of lay off any kind of alcohol right before the exam. Again, I know we're having Thanksgiving. Some people, if they are of age, their families like to have wine and things like that. Okay, probably kind of keep it to Thursday because if you start going into the weekend and then you've got an exam on Monday morning, now we might have a problem where that studying that last couple days is affected and then your retention and recall might be affected on Monday morning. So keep aware of that. It does affect cognition. It also affects sleep. So aforementioned conversation about sleep, alcohol does inhibit people from getting into good REM deep sleep. And so that's a problem because of what I was saying about the importance of sleep earlier on in the brain. So just some things, attention span, sleep issues, impairment to cognitive ability, right? And this is not even like if you get drunk, right? I'm just talking about like a little bit of alcohol. You have some issues for a few days after. And for some folks, especially if you're already prone to feeling anxious or depressed, it can increase that tendency. So particular caution there. Now, resources. Okay, there are resources to help you in this last few weeks. And we do not, the Writing Center ends this week, but not all of us end. Most of us keep working. So feel free to access resources. Learning services, so of course, we talked about the tutoring. If you already have a tutor, great. Feel free to talk to them and make plans to get help before your finals. Now would be the time. If you do not have a tutor, it is actually too late to get one. So I'm sorry about that. At that point, your best option would be the study groups, talking to your classmates, getting help there, or potentially scheduling a meeting with your teachers to get some extra help. But the learning services professional staff is definitely available. You can schedule a one-on-one meeting with me or any of the other learning services professionals. We can talk to you about your individual exam situations, give you some tips and techniques specific to your situations. If maybe you struggled with tests in a particular class earlier in the semester, you want some ideas how to do better, we can do that. The CSES office, that's the other half of my job. They have 2 success coaches there, student success coaches, that are also happy to meet with you on this kind of stuff and kind of help you kind of get your head in the game, give you some success coaching. The library staff for those papers, super helpful. They are doing stuff virtually. So of course, if you're here this week, through this week on campus, you can walk in and get help from one of the librarians on helping find your research. But if you're not on campus, you can remote, you can chat. They have a live chat feature. They also have a video. You can sign up for a video conference or a phone conference with the librarians to help you find your research. I really think that they're magicians because what I do is I drop a student off with them and then in 20 minutes they have all of their sources. So really feel free to use that service if you are having any kind of concern or anxiety about finding sources for a paper or a project, they're really great. I talked about the Writing Center already, so we've got the asynchronous and the synchronous information there. And I'm happy to send this to anybody that wants it. There's also the university's remote resources page, so that will show you all of the ways to access support during remote instruction, including things like information technology and all of that. So that's the end of that. Quick thing, I'm just going to show you guys. I have the handout that it says a lot of the same stuff that I was going through on the PowerPoint. But I'll just go through a couple of things on here. And again, I can email this to anybody that wants it. I'll keep paper copies out at the desk in the library if they're still on campus too. A lot of the same stuff, just a little more detail than what's in the PowerPoint. A couple of things I wanted to point out here. Oh, this is good. Making a list of questions, and we talked about that. It's a good idea to do that both for the practice test stuff, but also for what you need help with, and maybe for tutoring if you're going to see a tutor. That's a good thing to recommend for 2 teams as well, to make that list of confusing things. Ryan, we talked about the group studying and the stuff to be careful about. Even if you don't really like group studying usually, it's not that bad of an idea just to give it a shot, because let's say you know the stuff, right? It's not like you need somebody to explain it to you. Those of you who are tutors know that explaining it to somebody else is still outstanding practice, right? And so even if you're just helping somebody else, that might still be really useful for you. So just be open to the idea, and you can do that stuff on Zoom. Microsoft Teams, any of that makes it kind of easy to do. Okay, talked about a lot of this stuff already. Yes. Setting up the good testing environment, looking over the test, reading the directions carefully. Yes. We talked about changing answers, getting up. There's just more details on all of this stuff. And then final paper writing. I think most of this is pretty much the same as what I said. Yes, and there's more of the resources. Okay, so I'm going to leave a few minutes here for questions. Any questions, stuff I haven't covered yet that people would like me to speak about or give you some ideas? Anyone? If anybody wants me to send them any of this information electronically, let me know, and I can do that. You can drop a chat in there or email me separately. I'll just go ahead and, because it's not anywhere in the stuff actually, I'll put my email address in the chat here. So anybody's welcome to email me directly if they want anything. So I'll do that. Okay. Any other questions or concerns? Oh, I see, perfect. Okay, sure. Yep, that's fine. Put that in the chat if you want me to send it to you. I'll write down some names here of people who want stuff. Very good. Any other questions? I see a few latecomers I didn't catch at the beginning, so I'm getting your names down, because what I'm going to do here as soon as we're done is the drawing. Okay. All right. I am going to go off of the presentation. Let me stop share. Okay, folks, thank you for hanging on here. So let me go ahead, get my spreadsheet of names up, put these last couple on here, and I'm going to do a drawing. So first, let's see. Suppose we'll do the monthly drawing first, suppose, that'd be good. Okay, so I'm gonna put everybody onto the list, copy and paste onto my big list. Okay, so we've got 2 prizes. So this is for anybody who came to a session from October 27th, because we did the last drawing on October 20th. So from October 27th until today, anybody who came to one of those sessions, each time you came, you got an entry. And it looks like we have 75 total names. So I'll put okay. So what should we raffle first? Raincoat? Sound good? Yeah. So we'll raffle this. Oh, and the bookstore informed me that, because these are from the bookstore, they have tags on them. If the size does not work, you are able to take them back and do an even exchange with the bookstore for a different size. So, all right, the winner of the raincoat is Nick Starbacci. Still on there, Nick? There you are. No, that's cool. Is Nick still on there?
Nope, I'm here.
You won a rain jacket, my friend.
Awesome, thank you.
Are you still on campus?
Yes,
You can let me know when it's good and I will give it to you.
sounds good. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Okay. All right, the winner of the sweatshirt. 39. Is Micah Gardner. Maria, are you still on here? She's not. Micah doesn't like to come out in public. I'll have to tell him. Okay.
Oh, Micah went home already.
Did he really?
Yeah.
I'll talk to him and see what he wants to do with it. But
Okay.
he has won again. Okay, and then one more. Let's do, so this is gonna be the grand prize. So everybody from the beginning of the semester to now that's come got an entry each time. So we'll raffle off the Bluetooth speaker. So this will be a whole lot more entries. We've got 261, that's a lot, okay. Okay, so, pretty Bluetooth speaker here. Who wins this? Okay. 132, 132. Zeta. Zeta, are you still on the call?
Yes.
You won a Bluetooth, my dear. Are you still here? Like on campus?
Yes.
Let me know when you can come by to pick it up. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. So that is that. That brings us to a conclusion. I'm sorry if you didn't win. But I am glad that some of you were able to get some prizes this semester, and I hope that everybody was able to get some information that's helpful for this semester and future semesters. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will look forward to seeing hopefully some of you at sessions next semester. Okay? See ya.
Yeah.